Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? We're digging into competency-based education today, CBE, as it's often called.
Yeah, it's one of those things you hear everywhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we're really going to break it down, figure out what it actually means, beyond just the buzzword,
Yeah, definitely.
especially, because it seems like it could be a really big deal for students who learn a bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got some really interesting sources here, by the way, to help us do that.
I do. I did a lot of digging on this one.
Cool.
So CBE, from what I understand,
Yeah.
it's not just about like showing up to class every day and spending a certain number of hours.
Right.
It's more about what you can actually like do.
Exactly. It's about showing what you know and what you can do.
Yeah.
Like, you've probably heard that phrase, like, time served in education.
Right.
It's kind of like that, where it's like, oh, you spent this much time in this class, so you must have learned something. But CBE really challenges that.
So it's kind of like instead of everyone like moving at the exact same pace,
Mm-hmm.
students kind of go at their own speed and really focus on like actually getting those skills down.
Yeah. And it's a really important distinction from standards-based education, which, don't get me wrong, standards are important,
Sure.
but it can be really rigid. And that doesn't work for everyone, you know?
Yeah.
Especially, like you said, for students who are neurodiverse, they might need a different approach.
One of the sources I found actually had a really, I thought, kind of fun way of explaining it.
Oh, yeah.
They compared it to baking a cake,
Okay.
which I love a good analogy. How about you?
Oh, I'm all about a good analogy. And who doesn't love cake?
Exactly. And so basically they were saying, like, instead of everyone having to follow like the exact same recipe,
Hmm.
right, with CBE, it's more about making sure that like everyone can bake a cake,
Right.
even if they use
Hmm.
like, a different kind of oven,
Yeah. Different ingredients.
different ingredients, but ultimately they end up with that, delicious cake at the end.
Right, exactly. Like, imagine a classroom where, it's not just about memorizing the recipe,
Right.
but it's about, like, understanding, like, the why behind it. Like,
Yeah.
the science of baking.
Totally.
And they can actually, like, apply that knowledge in a way that makes sense to them.
So like if you have a student who learns best
Yeah.
by doing things, very hands-on,
Yeah.
they might, instead of like, just doing like fraction problems on a worksheet,
Right.
they might actually bake a cake and have to like figure out, okay, well, if I need to add, half a cup of flour,
Yeah.
what does that actually look like?
Exactly. Or like if you have a student who's a visual learner, they might, see a pie chart that breaks down, the percentages of each ingredient.
Yeah.
It's really about, recognizing that there are different ways to get to that same understanding. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah. And it sounds like kind of the main thing with this whole CBE approach is like really giving everyone the tools
Yes.
and the space like to succeed based on, what works for them.
Absolutely. And I think that's how it really levels the playing field,
Right.
because it recognizes that like everyone has their own strengths, everyone learns differently,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And it's not just about like baking, right? Like one of the sources also talked about it in terms of learning music,
Oh, yeah.
which I thought was interesting too.
Makes sense. Right.
Because like, not everyone's going to be into like playing the piano
Totally.
or like, the violin.
Right. Everyone's got their own thing, like
Right.
some people are really into classical music and
Yeah.
some people are like all about that jazz.
Totally. Like I always think of that saying, like, you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Exactly. And CBE really gets that.
Yeah.
It's about like finding what works for each student.
Totally. And then, one thing that really stuck out to me was how this whole CBE approach
Mhm.
could really help students with learning differences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like they talk about, in one of the sources, they mentioned students who have trouble with auditory processing.
Right.
So like if you were trying to teach them, I don't know, like a musical concept or something,
Well,
it probably wouldn't be that helpful to just like talk to them about it, right?
Definitely not. They need a different approach.
Yeah, so CBE would be more like, okay, maybe we can like use visual aids or something.
Right. Or like even have them, like feel the vibrations of the instrument
Oh,
so they can like actually experience the sound in a different way.
yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's just like you said, it's like providing those different avenues to understanding
Dizzy gadget.
instead of being like, nope, this is the only way to learn this.
Right, because that doesn't work for everyone. And then you have students with dyslexia, for example, who might really struggle with like traditional written tests.
Oh, for sure.
But with CBE, they could maybe like compose their own piece of music,
Oh, wow.
or give a presentation, or even like build a model that shows how sound waves work, you know?
That's amazing. So it's really like opening up all these possibilities for how you can,
Yeah, show what you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about like one way of showing that you understand something.
Right. And I think that's so important for building confidence too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when students feel like, okay, I can actually show what I know in a way that makes sense to me,
Yeah,
that's when they really start to thrive, you know?
totally. And what about like students with ADHD?
Yeah.
Because I feel like, they often need like a really specific kind of approach to learning as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if you have them like sitting still for too long, it's just like not going to work.
Exactly. And CBE recognizes that. Like, it allows for more flexibility in terms of, like how the classroom is set up, the
Yeah.
pacing of the lessons, even just like, taking breaks when they need to.
Right.
Because some students with ADHD, they just need to like move around,
Yeah, totally.
or
Yeah.
take a break when their focus starts to go. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because once they're able to like refocus,
Yeah.
they can really like grasp the information.
So, I mean, it sounds like this CBE approach could be like really beneficial for a lot of different types of learners.
It really does.
But I mean, I'm curious, like, is there actually evidence that it works?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, have there been studies or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, like the source mentions some research from the Rand Corporation
Okay.
and the Aurora Institute.
And those are both like pretty well-respected organizations.
Yeah, they're like some of the top in the field.
So what did they find? Like, did they find that CDE actually leads to better outcomes for students?
They did, yeah, like they found that students in CBE programs, they tend to have higher graduation rates.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
And their grades are actually better too.
Yeah, they are. And they're also more likely to go on to college,
Oh, wow.
which is really promising.
Yeah, that's great. Like, that's really what it's all about, right?
Yeah,
It's not just about like checking the boxes and getting people through the system.
right.
It's about actually setting them up to like do well in life.
Exactly. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was
Yeah.
the research also found that CBE can have a big impact on students' confidence
Oh, interesting.
and their engagement in school.
Okay, why is that? What is it about CDE that seems to boost confidence?
Well, I think it's because it gives students more control over their own learning,
Okay.
Like they're not just being told what to do and how to do it.
Right.
They get to actually have a say in like what they're learning and how they're learning it.
Yeah, it's more like, I don't know, like active learning or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just like passively sitting there and just absorbing information.
Yeah, like think about it. Like if you're really interested in something
Yeah.
and you get to actually explore it in a way that makes sense to you,
Right?
aren't you going to be more engaged and more excited to learn?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to remember it better too, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So, I mean, we've talked a lot about how this can impact like students while they're in school.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, what do you think? How could CBE potentially impact like people's careers and stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it could have a huge impact
Yeah.
because like imagine a world where everyone feels empowered to like really identify their strengths
Yeah.
and pursue their passions,
Right.
and then they can actually use those talents in their careers.
Totally. It's like instead of just like slotting people into these like predefined roles,
Yeah.
it's more about like, okay, what are you good at? What are you passionate about?
Yeah.
And how can we like, find a place for that in the world?
Exactly. And I think that would lead to a much more like fulfilling and productive workforce, don't you think?
Absolutely. And probably more innovation too, right?
Oh, for sure. Because when people are allowed to be creative and think outside the box,
Yeah.
that's when the really like groundbreaking stuff happens.
Yeah. And it seems like CBE could be like a really important part of making that happen.
Absolutely. It's definitely a step in the right direction.
Well, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into competency-based education.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I feel like we've learned a lot, and hopefully you have too.
Yeah, it's been a good one.
And, the main takeaway for me is that, like, there's so much potential with this approach.
Absolutely.
And, even though it might seem kind of like a new thing to some people,
Yeah, it's still emerging.
it really does seem like it could be, like, really transformative.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So, I don't know, what do you think? Like, what's the one thing you hope people, like, take away from this conversation?
I would say like, don't be afraid to embrace new ideas
Okay.
and to think differently about education,
Yeah.
because what we've been doing might not be working for everyone.
Right.
And it's time to, like, find new and better ways to help all students succeed.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
And listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.